that bounces between film, TV, and video games. He has written and sold feature scripts, been a showrunner on a TV series that on the CW that premiered at Con Series. He co-created an indie game franchise called Hello Puppets that he sold to Facebook, which was released on their Oculus platform, and now is in production on the sequel. He has been featured in Variety, Deadline Hollywood, Wired, and Kotaku. You can find him online at andrewwriting.com, and I am very proud to say that he is my friend. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy, and he's going to give you some great advice. And without further ado, I turn you over to Mr. Allen.
Thanks so much, Matt. Hi, everybody. I can't see or hear you, so just bear with me. But it's so great to be with you today. And to start off, I was looking for kind of an image that I thought would be a good starting point, and this one really felt perfect to me. It's Homer Simpson from the show The Simpsons, working in his garage. He's trying to create a piece of postmodern art, and he's whacking a piece of concrete with a chainsaw, yelling, "Why won't you be art?" And I have often felt this way throughout my career, so it just felt very appropriate for me as kind of an opening thing. So before I get going here, I just want to take a quick second and give a big thank you to Wi-Fi Film Festival, Washburn, and Matt Nyquist in particular. I've had the pleasure of knowing Matt for a long time. He is as good a guy, as talented, and as generous a collaborator as you could hope for. So much of a career in the arts comes down to who you meet and who you're lucky enough to come in contact with. And if you have the good fortune to be taught by Matt or to collaborate with Matt, you've already got a pretty huge leg up because they don't make them much better in terms of character or reliability or talent or just his ability to inspire and lift people up who are around him. So just wanted to give a big thank you to Matt for being such a great guy and for inviting me to be here. So before I get going, real quick, I just want to give you a quick 2 second on who am I and why am I talking to you. As Matt mentioned, I'm a writer and producer with a dual focus in games as well as movies and television. I wrote a movie based on the Battlefield video game franchise for Electronic Arts. I was a showrunner on a CW show. I co-created an indie horror video game franchise called Hello Puppets. And last but not least, I'm Batman. And you might be thinking he's not Batman, but I'm afraid that I have proof. I'm on set here, and this is my context, clearly labeled Batman, and I'm wearing it. So I'll bet you feel kind of silly now. Anyway, before I get going, I want to give a quick disclaimer, which is that I'm mostly in writing and producing in video games and movies and television. That's what I really know, and this talk will be, I think, the most useful if you're looking at writing, directing, or producing. Sound, editing, production design, cinematography, those are amazing, great careers. They're incredibly lucrative. They're very satisfying. It's an amazing creative opportunity. I don't always understand those career paths as well as the stuff that I more specifically have done. The goal of this talk is to be useful no matter what you're trying to do. But if at any point I imperfectly understand those particular career paths, I apologize. I'll do the best I can. And if you're interested in those things and you have any questions, you don't feel like we're covered by my talk, I'm always happy to try to answer them. So starting off, we need to start off with what I call a swift kick in the butt. And this is just something that it's a little unpleasant, but I've heard that the theme that Washburn is focusing on with Wi-Fi and well in the semester is truth. And I do think that when we're talking about a career in the arts, whether that's film, television, games, podcasts, comics, whatever it is, I think we need to start with some truth about what a career in the arts is really like. Um, and the first thing I want to sort of point out is that this is a very hard way to make a living. The work itself is hard, but it's also even harder just to get the opportunity to do the work in the first place. It's very challenging. It may take a long time to be successful. Um, you really kind of want to ask yourself, are you okay waiting longer than your friends to be financially secure? It was at least 10 years for me before I started really making any money doing what I cared about doing, what I loved doing. And in that time, I was renting dumpy little apartments, watching my friends and family, people my age, people younger than me, buying homes, starting families, and it's painful at times to watch that. So you want to make sure that's something you're okay with. Now that may not happen to you. Somebody listening might be smarter than me, more talented than me, harder working, or luckier than me. And if you're any of those things, please hire me because I'm a great worker and I would love to work for you. But so it may not take that long for you, but just be aware it's possible and ask yourself, is that something that you're comfortable with? And then also, can you cope with a high degree of uncertainty about your future? And this is another really important thing because, even if you're making money, even if someone's paying you to do something in the arts, a lot of times there's an end date right on the horizon. And once you hit that end date, you got to start all over, figure out what the next thing is. I often compare it to it's like being an airplane that's trying to take off on a runway, but you're actually building the runway as you take off. And it can be stressful. There's something thrilling and fun about it, but if you're someone that needs a high degree of stability, it might be a challenging thing for you to mentally acclimate to. And then the last thing is just that, rejection is going to become your best friend. You're going to deal with you will always, always hear more no's than yeses when you work in this in the creative arts. But the main thing to remember is that it's not personal, and there's both good news and bad news. The good news is you're not alone in this. The big stars, your heroes, whoever it is you've heard of in this industry, they're actually getting rejected a lot too. You're just not hearing about it. But there's also kind of bad news in that, which is that you're never going to outgrow it. You're never going to get to a point in your career where you don't hear no. And it's really important to learn how to be able to hear and internalize it, but not take it personally. It's bad to completely ignore negative feedback, and it's bad to let it come inside and destroy you. You've got to find that middle road where you hear it, you absorb it, but you don't let it break you in. And so you want to ask yourself before you embark on this career, can I hear no a lot and keep moving forward and keep believing in myself? So Sorry, that was kind of rough. So let's look at a picture of my cat for a second. This is Jonesy. She's playing in a drawer. She's very cute. She's named after the cat in Alien. She's adorable. So let's all just take some of that negative energy out and enjoy looking at Jonesy for a second. So without further ado, before I get going, to be honest with you, I've heard people give talks like this before, and I often don't like them. I mean, the stuff at Wi-Fi at Washburn, everybody who's speaking here is doing a great job. But at a lot of other places where I hear talks like this, I really don't like them. And I heard of a few when I was young, when I was a student, and I really disliked them there too. And the reason I often dislike them is that they're guilty of something called hagiography. And if you've never heard of this, hagiography is writing the biography of a saint. And I often feel that when people are given an opportunity to speak to people that are embarking on a career, they use it as an opportunity to tell themselves and you sort of self-sustaining and self-fulfilling myths about themselves, where they are and how they got there. They're as much talking to themselves as they're talking to you, and it feels like they are mostly interested in making themselves feel better about where they are and how they got there. And what ends up happening is they give you a lot of platitudes that aren't useful and don't help you construct your own path to be successful. And you hear them say a lot of the same stuff. They say things like, I just followed my dreams and I worked really, really hard and I had a vision, and all that stuff is great and it's true to a point. But as a person that's trying to embark on their own career and figure out, well, how am I going to take what this person did and construct my own path? It's not very helpful. And then the other fact is that it's also, frankly, a little untrue. If you gave these people a truth serum and forced them to answer these questions, what they would mostly tell you is some version of, I knew someone, I got insanely lucky, or I failed for years and years, and then suddenly something worked, and I have no idea what it was, or if I can do it again, please help me. And that is very often what people are really thinking and feeling about their own careers. And they don't want to tell you that. They want to tell you some kind of vague, boring platitude that isn't helpful. So let's do something different than that. I want to try to give you the story of how I got where I am, be very honest about where I am, be very honest about where I got there. But I really want to focus on things that are applicable and useful for you that you can take out into your own life and figure out your own path up this mountain. So that's why the name of this talk is Andrew's Mistakes. And I've chosen as a picture a dog falling off of a bed as he tries to walk in a circle. And that feels very appropriate. I have often felt like this in my career. And I'm going to try to give you three examples in kind of in chronological order of times where I think I did something wrong that hurt me in a professional capacity. And I want to talk about how did I make that mistake? What was it? Why did I do it? And most importantly, what can you learn from it? And how can you avoid it? So that for you, when you walk your path into this career in the arts, maybe it won't take you 10 years like it took me. Maybe it'll take you 5 years or 4 years. Maybe it'll take you 1 year, less than a year. And again, if it takes you less than a year, I beg you to please hire me. So mistake number one. This is my first one, waiting around. And I think this is unfortunately quite a common mistake. So I discovered my love of creating things when I was in high school. We had a great theater arts program, and I got into acting at first. We did Shakespeare, Neil Simon, Arthur Miller, all kinds of, all the classics, and I loved doing it. And then we had one acts where you could write and direct small plays that were put up on the stage. And from there, I discovered I even more than acting, I like controlling what all the actors say, and I love working with them. And then somebody handed me a camera for my senior year. I did a short film project as one of my finals. You can see a picture of it there. Me and two friends are in our prom suits pretending to be Tarantino-esque hitmen, and doing this just turned me on to film, and I realized I wanted to write and direct movies, and I knew that was what I wanted to be doing. And so I focused in on writing and directing film, and I knew I needed to start writing scripts right away. And I had a good amount of time. I had 4 years of college. I would end up going to grad film school at USC, where I met Matt. And so, I had my senior year of high school, so it's a good 7, maybe 8 years, and thankfully, in all of that time, I wrote exactly nothing. I wrote zero. I wrote not one single usable script. I didn't really even finish a single script, and to be honest with you, I barely even started any. And it's an almost, when I look back on it, it's almost impossible to understand how I could go that long knowing I wanted to do something and put almost zero work into actually achieving it. And I've reflected a lot about why I did that. And I think the shortest and most convenient answer is this kind of overused but still very applicable meme, which is, I was not getting anything done because I was too overwhelmed, which made me too overwhelmed because I haven't gotten anything done. And I was just going in a cycle like this. I think when I look back on it, I think a few people gave me some sort of bracing talks about, I would say, I'm going to go to Hollywood, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be a director. And I think, some friends and family would give me these really tough love talks about how hard it was going to be. And they were meant well, but the way I received them was that it made me sort of become terrified of my future. And I just became an inveterate procrastinator. And I would just do anything. I would always come up with reasons why. Well, it's not a good time. I'm in the middle of finals. It's not a good time. It's summer break. I don't have access to the library. It's not a good time. It's almost Christmas. And then it just would keep getting kicked down the road until 8 years went by and I have no idea what happened. And that was crucial time I could have been using to practice and perfect and sharpen that I just didn't. So, what can you learn from this? The first and most important thing is don't be overwhelmed. You can do this. There's a great old saying about how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. Don't make my mistake of assuming you need to figure out your whole career and everywhere you're going to go and why you're going to be successful right now. You don't have to figure that out, but you do need to be working every single day, and you've got to start working now. Don't wait for permission from anyone. You're not a professional when you get your big break. The reality is, for most people, there's no such thing as a big break. It's a myth. No one is going to call you up and hand you a big check and say, you're a professional now, start working. You decide when you're a professional, and the day that you start working and taking your craft seriously is the day you're a professional. The reality is you need to start now because this is going to take time, even if you have talent. And that kind of leads me to my next point, which is something called Ira's gap. The Ira in question is Ira Glass. He's a journalist for NPR, podcaster. He has a very successful podcast called This American Life, which, if you're ever looking for some great inspiration for stories, I can't recommend it highly enough. Now, Ira has a really, really great quote that I think is really useful for when people are starting out in this industry, and why so many people intend to get into the arts and then they don't. They never take the first step. And I'd like to reproduce it for you here. What Ira says is, nobody tells this to people who are beginners. And I wish someone told me, all of us who do creative work, we get into it because we have good taste. But there's this gap. The first couple of years you make stuff, it's just not that good. Trying to be good, it has potential, but it's not. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, is still killer. And your taste is why your work disappoints you. A lot of people never get past this phase, they quit. What he's saying is that you have been a media consumer almost since the day you were born. You've got 20 plus years of media. So your media consumption skills are up here. you've only been creating media in the best case scenario for at most a handful of years. So your skill making it is down here, and the two aren't lining up. So you're making things and then you're looking at them and then they're not satisfying to you and you can't figure out why. But if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Just because you know why a movie is bad or a TV show is bad or a game is bad or a podcast is bad, that actually doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you can produce a better one. Assuming that you could is kind of like saying that just because you can drive over a bridge and tell that the bridge is intact means that you could somehow also build one. So you have to give yourself a break and realize that, yeah, my skills need some time to catch up. And what Ira goes on to say is if you want to close that gap, you've just got to make a lot of stuff and you've got to give yourself time and you've got to not be discouraged. So some of you might be getting discouraged because you're making things and those things aren't the way you wanted them to be. Good news is the gap is there, but it will close as you keep working. So don't stop. The other thing that I think stops a lot of people early on is they have a voice in their head all the time that's telling them that their work sucks while they're making it. And I have really good news for you about that voice, which is the little voice in your head is a liar. I know it sounds like it's very authoritative and it's just being honest with you, but the reality is it's your fear and your insecurity pretending to be your instinct. Now, down the road, after you've worked for a while and after you've spent some time honing your craft, you will have a voice that will really guide you and help you make the right choices and avoid bad ones. But right now, I promise you, your voice is not developed. It doesn't know what it's talking about. And the most important thing you can do is just ignore it. Whatever is telling you that what you're making isn't good and sucks, tune it out. It's not helpful. It's just trying to distract you. So, let's say that I've convinced you not to be discouraged, not to worry about whether your initial work lives up to your standards, and not to worry about the little voice in your head. You might be next asking, how do you get started? Because I think this is one of the hardest questions to answer is, okay, I want to be a professional. What's the first step? What is the first move I need to make? What's the first project that I need to create? And I want to try to give you some practical steps that I think are really helpful that I wish I had done and that I now know are important that I think can really, really help you launch yourself and separate from the competition a little bit. And what you want to do is you want to use what you have around you. And the first thing I want everybody here to do is I want you to really sit back and take stock and think about do you is does someone in your family have an interesting life story, you or relatives? Like did your grandparents fight in a war or did your cousin overcome a really rare illness? Do you have a friend that I don't know, had something crazy happen, had got kidnapped somewhere and escaped? Is there any really interesting story? And the thing is, everyone has these stories. When your family or your friends sit around and they recount some wild thing because they want to blow people's minds, what is that story? Well, the good news is that could be a great launching point for your first project because one of the key separators that can get you elevated against competition that have been professionals for years. If you as just starting out and me, someone who's spent a few years in the industry, if we're both competing for a project, if you have a personal connection to that project, if it's something that you know because it's your family or your friend or you lived it, that's going to separate you. That's going to make you stand out and that's going to make people want to work with you. This is so important that I'll be honest with you. I spend a fair amount of time pitching projects trying to come up with a personal connection I have to this thing when I frankly usually don't. So it's something that if you don't have it, it becomes a constant problem in a pitch. So if you've got a great story anywhere in your family, anywhere in your friend circle that you think you have access to, please look at that and consider that as a great jumping off point to make a script, a comic book, a podcast, a game, a movie, whatever it is. Look at those opportunities because they're really, really powerful. The second thing is, do you have access to a cool filming location? The example of this I give is that until very recently, my brother owned a farm and it was a pretty big farm and it had tons of forest in it. So I always knew that if I ever wrote anything that was set in a forest, boom, I have a free filming location right there and a great filming location, one that normal productions would have to pay tens of thousands of dollars for. So that's an advantage that I had. I could get professional production value on a forest setting that would cost most people way more money. And everyone has these advantages. And it may not be a farm, but ask yourself, do you know somebody that has, I don't know, a cool car that could be, like a vintage car that could be part of a project? Do you know someone that owns a store that would let you shoot there at night that would normally be a very expensive location? Do you know someone that, I don't know, has an empty warehouse or has access to some, to something cool and visual that could be the beginning or the genesis point of a cool project? Because that stuff is so crucial in giving you a leg up so that you don't have to start from absolute zero. The next thing, of course, is family connections. And I always say this to people just because most people tend to assume they have no family connections to Hollywood or the entertainment industry at all. But I'll bet you actually do. If you actually sit down and talk to your friends and your family, your friends' parents, your cousins, your uncles, your aunts, if you string together enough connections, almost always you will eventually throw the dart and land on somebody that's working somewhere in entertainment. And that first connection point can really be helpful just to get your foot in the door. So always ask, have I really been thorough in looking around and trying to figure out if I know anybody? And then the last thing, and this was a big thing for me, is passion or knowledge of something. So for me, when I started out in film and television, I was the video game guy. That's how I branded myself. That's how I walked into meetings. And that got me into some great meetings I never would have gotten otherwise. I was trying to separate myself from other writers. I was trying to separate myself from other directors. And so I would say, hey, you know how the video game industry is this big industry, it makes a ton of money, but you don't know anything about it. I can explain it to you really quickly. And that became really valuable because I loved video games. I was passionate about them. And passion is something everyone in this industry wants. I don't care whether they're working on an indie film or the Fast and the Furious. Everybody wants to work with people that are passionate. They never get over that. Because everyone who gets into entertainment at some point got into it because they're passionate about telling stories. So always ask yourself, are you passionate about something? Is there something you know a lot about, you care deeply about, something that you could speak to with a lot of heart and a lot of passion? Because that is a great place to start for a potential project. The next thing I want to sort of give you as a piece of advice, and this is something I'll get into my own failure to do this later, but always focus on personality and passion over polish. Don't worry about making projects that look and sound like a Hollywood movie or look and sound like a TV show or a AAA game or whatever it is. The technical stuff really does not matter as much at this stage as it does that it's just unique and personal. And I want to give you a few examples to sort of talk about why I think that's so important. And the first example I'm going to give you is a YouTube channel called Backrooms, or the YouTube channel is called Kane Pixels. And Kane Pixels, as far as I know, and I've never met him, so I can't prove this, but as far as I can tell, is a 16-year-old kid that is a self-taught VFX artist who started making a series of horror shorts on YouTube called Backrooms. And these things aren't exactly like 3-act structure masterpieces. Most of them are 9 or 10 minute first-person POV camera shots wandering around in office complexes where nothing happens for like 8 minutes. And then right at the end, a monster jumps out. And this has been turned into millions upon millions of views on YouTube. There's a huge fan subreddit for it. There's wikis. People are dissecting what does it mean? What's the lore? What's the story? And this is, I don't know if he's done this, but I'm telling you that this kid could get a meeting anywhere in Hollywood that he wants based on the social media engagement numbers that he has. And look, these aren't polished feature films. You can't package this and throw it onto a big screen. It doesn't matter. It's unique. It's got a ton of personality. It's really, really distinctive and cool and interesting. And that's what matters. Second example is Issa Rae, who made the very successful and starred in and created the successful HBO show Insecure. She started out with a YouTube series called Awkward Black Girl, and it was just not sketch comedy, but it was like short comedy tidbits about her life from her perspective. And look, this is a screen cap from one of them. It's clearly not Hollywood lighting, Hollywood sound, Hollywood actors. It's all very run and gun stuff made on a shoestring budget. It doesn't matter though, because what it had was so much personality, so much unique perspective. She was speaking to an experience no one else was really speaking to, and it made her stand out. And that led to an HBO show, and that has now led to her producing and starring in a ton of different things. She's had a wildly successful career, and she started with the most stripped down, basic, unpolished, but incredibly unique and personality filled YouTube series. And the last example I'll give you is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which is a show you might be familiar with. It's on FX. It's, I believe, now the longest running live action comedy in network television history. And It's Always Sunny has been running for 15, 16 years. It's made huge stars out of everyone who's involved in it. And it began as a little skit that the actors starring in it did called Charlie Has Cancer, which was filmed with a handy cam with no lighting. No, it didn't even have sound. It was just, crude on camera sound. And the whole setup was, Charlie has cancer and his neighbor comes over to try to borrow sugar for his coffee. And it was like a 2 to 3 minute sketch. They didn't post it on YouTube. It was a pitch material. They used it to try to sell the show they wanted to make. It's not, a technical masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination. It's not polished. It's not necessarily the most thoroughly thought out thing, but it has a really unique voice. They were speaking to this very dark sense of humor that was just incredibly fresh and original. And it was clear in that piece that they had something to say. And that got them a commitment for the show that became It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And that led to the rest of their career. So, all three of these examples, what I'm just trying to drive home to you is don't focus on don't try to make a science fiction epic that's going to compete with a Marvel movie right now, because you will fail. Don't try to make something that you've seen someone else make, because that's going to be redundant. Try to make something that is unique, that is fresh, that is your voice, that is a new perspective that only you have. And don't worry about the technical aspect of it. Just worry about it shining through with your personality. So that's mistake one. Now it's time to move on to my second mistake, which is missing my shot. And this is how I feel every time I think about this. So, fast forward a few years, I get into USC's grad film program, and I'm there for a year and a half. And I get an internship at Imagine Entertainment, which is owned by these two guys. This is Ron Howard and Brian Grazer. And that was a good start. Once I get in there, I befriended my boss, who was a very smart and incredibly resourceful development executive named Sarah Bowen. That was smart too. I also became friendly with her assistant, and that was even smarter. And as a quick side note, make friends with the assistants. Don't Everyone always wants to make friends with the big shot, the boss, the Steven Spielberg, the whatever. But the reality is, those people already have their people. They already have their network. Their assistants, though, and their interns, those are the bosses of the future. And they're still trying to build themselves. And if you make friends with them now, when they rise up, they might carry you with them. Now, it's going to take longer. It's going to take a few years for that to come to fruition. But frankly, most really meaningful, substantial networking connections you make, they're not going to pay off right away. It is going to take time, but that's where the most meaningful, substantial, life changing stuff can come from. So if you want to be smart, don't try to make friends with Ron Howard. Try to make friends with Ron Howard's assistant. Try to make friends with his intern, because they are hungry, they are young, they want to be successful, and they're probably going to be running things in a few years. So, anyway, I had become friends with Sarah. I became friends with her assistant. All those things are great. One day my boss took me to lunch, and she asked me what I was passionate about, and I pitched her a script that I'd been passionate about my whole life. I crushed the pitch. It was crazy. She told me, this sounds amazing. And she also said, by the way, there's a huge marketplace for this right now. I think people would buy this right now. Um, and you might be thinking, like, are you sure this is mistakes? Because this all sounds like it's going great. And then Sarah asked, can I read this script? And here's where the trouble starts. I had not finished the script. And this one is still hard for me. To be honest with you, I tried to start it a bunch of times. I'd locked myself in a library study room for weeks trying to break the script, trying to get going. And I'd always gotten discouraged and given up. It wasn't for a lack of effort. I just was so discouraged. I was letting the voice in my head run me in circles. Um, I just didn't trust myself to do the job. So I never really got going, and I never really finished it. So when she asked to read the script, I had nothing to show her. And I tried to frantically write it after that point, and it took me, I think, 6 or 7 months, and I finally produced something. But by the time I was done with it, I was done with the internship. She'd moved on to a different company. The opportunity was just kind of gone. I really had a shot there where I could have sold my first script before I was even out of film school at 23 or 24, which would have been life changing for me. And I missed it because I wasn't ready. So, what can you learn from this? The most important lesson you can take away from this is you have got to finish. And I know this sounds kind of obvious, but there is nothing more important than finishing the projects that you start, and having projects that are finished that you can show to people. It is crucially important. There's no other way to put it, but to say you don't know when your shot is coming. I didn't know my shot was going to be that day. You don't know when your shot's going to happen. You're going to get lucky. Eventually, you're going to be in the right room with the right person at the right time. And the question is, are you ready when that moment comes? You don't know when it's coming. Be ready for it. And I don't mean to put this bluntly, but the honest truth is professionals finish things. That's the difference between a professional and an amateur. It's not whether anybody pays you, it's not whether anybody sees you as a pro, none of that matters. Professionals finish their projects, amateurs don't. And at that moment, I was an amateur because I wasn't done and I wasn't ready. And I had an amazing opportunity that just drifted by me because even though I had tried really hard to be ready for it, I just wasn't. So that's a tough lesson. And some of you might be looking at this and saying, "I hear you, and I want to finish. I want to finish what I'm doing, but here's the truth: I have writer's block, so I can't finish." Writer's block. I have some really good news for you about writer's block. There is no such thing as writer's block. There is no such thing. Let me say this one more time. Please hear me. There is no such thing as writer's block. Let me explain what I mean by that. This is Aaron Sorkin. He's one of the most successful screenwriters of his generation, one of the most successful playwrights before that. Aaron says, when people ask me if I ever experience writer's block, I just have to laugh because that's my default position. I'm in a constant state of writer's block. What I run into from time to time is not having writer's block. Those are great days. I got to tell you, I completely agree with him about this. Anything you could describe to me about how you feel writer's block, you're stuck, you're frustrated, you don't know which way to go, you don't know what the script wants, you hate everything you write. That's every project I've ever worked on. I've written almost 20 scripts at this point, some on spec, some on commission, and I can tell you that I have never not been writer's block for 70 to 80% of the time at best. What's amazing is there's times when you're not blocked. And as Aaron says, those are amazing days, but you should not wait around for those days to happen because I'm sorry to tell you, if you think that's writer's block, that's just writing. It's a little bit like climbing Mount Everest and saying to someone, I have climber's block because I'm cold and tired. That ain't climber's block, that's just climbing. The Someone else I profoundly admire is Gillian Flynn. She wrote, is a very successful novelist who also became an incredibly good screenwriter. And Gillian says, I never wait for inspiration to strike because that would be a long, sad wait. Successful writing is one part inspiration and two parts sheer stubbornness. And I could not agree with her more about this. And it's about, we're talking about writing in particular, but this is useful in any artistic medium, no matter what you're making, whether it's films, comics. You're going to hit those points where you don't feel like you can move forward. And the good news is that's how everybody feels all the time. The bad news is it's not going away, and you're going to need to learn the tools to get past it. And you might be saying to yourself, okay, fine. So what do I do? I don't know how to move forward with this project. You're telling me I have to move forward. So what am I supposed to do? Explain it to me. Well, I want you to think of it this way. When you have writer's block, essentially what's going on is that you are at a crossroads. And one direction of those crossroads, you have an option that you hate. Another direction on the crossroads is an option that you hate slightly less. Guess what? Pick the one you hate slightly less and get walking. That's what it often boils down to. I'd love to tell you that writing is about being in love with what you're making, or creating is about being in love with what you're making all the time. But the reality is, a lot of times this is what it boils down to. It's you have a series of choices, you don't like any of them, so you think about, well, which one do I dislike the least, and you pick that one and you just keep going. And the reality is, this is what the creative process is so often like. A lot of times, especially when you're deep in the weeds of making something, you're not going to love it. It's hard work, and sometimes you just have to trust that the passion that got you into the project on the first place is not going to lead you wrong. And you've just got to put your nose down and keep moving forward. And sometimes just by moving forward, you'll actually find the solution you were looking for. But I promise you, you'll never find the solution if you let the little voice in your head run you and if you don't make forward progress. Always make forward progress. You can go back and revise, but only let yourself do that if you will commit to getting all the way back to the point that you left off at and then forward from there. All right, so let's say you got through all of that. You have practiced your craft. You've overcome the voice in your head. You've overcome the illusion of writer's block, and you've made something. Let's say you have made something that's good. And by good, remember, I don't mean it's going to compete with Marvel. It's going to compete with what's on Netflix. I mean, it's you. It's got your voice and it tells the world what you have to offer. Let's say you've done that. Now what? Because this is an equally sort of unfathomable step, right? It's hard to figure out, okay, I've got something I'm proud of. What am I supposed to do with it? How is this supposed to turn into a career for me? The next step, now look, there's some universes where someone might come and cut you a check and say they want to buy the rights to this and they want to go make it right now. And if so, you can ignore what I'm about to say next because you've just jumped way ahead. But assuming that you need to rub some sticks together and make some fire, what should be your next goal now that you have this thing you're proud of? Your next goal needs to be representation. This is the key step. This is the incredibly important bridge you need to cross, after which things don't become easy, but they get much easier. For better or for worse, you need reps. You just need them. But I feel like no one talks about representation to people that are starting out. And there's a lot of confusion about what are reps, where do you find them, how do you get them, what do they do for you, how do you pay them? So I want to try to push through that cloud of sort of foggy uncertainty and try to give you some direct, hard information about who these people are, where they are, how you can get them, and what they can do for you. So the first type of rep we're going to talk about is an agent. I'm sure you've all heard of agents. They're somewhat well known in popular culture. But what is an agent? What do they do for you exactly? Well, an agent is someone who helps you find work in theory. I say in theory because, it depends on the agent. Some agents are great. A lot of people have agents that they feel like don't do much for them. But in theory, they're supposed to help you find the next gig, find the next thing that you're going to work on. They also are helpful for negotiating contracts. They will be your voice at the negotiating table when you're trying to figure out how much money are you going to pay me. And that's really important because you never want to negotiate what you're going to get paid yourself because it puts you in a weakened position. It lets them leverage their personal relationship with you. You want someone that can be your intermediary to stand up for you who doesn't care if this person doesn't like them or not. So those are the two things that they tend to do. They will always, always, always work at a large firm. Some of the biggest ones are CAA, WME, UTA, Gersh, some other ones. They're always buying and acquiring each other, so the names change around. But agents, the more senior an agent is, the more clients they will probably have. If you get a very junior agent, they might have only a handful. But if you're getting a very senior agent, for one, you might have multiple agents, and secondly, they will have a ton of clients. And their value really comes from the large firm that they work at because the thing they focus on is something called packaging. What packaging is it means that let's say that you write a script that gets a lot of heat on it, and you manage to get that script and yourself in the door at, let's say, WME. So you get in at WME and they like your script a lot, and let's say they represent you as a writer. Well, now there are all these agents who represent WME directors, WME producers, WME actors. And now WME wants to get as many of their clients attached to that project as they possibly can because they're getting a fee for everybody that they put in the project and they want to keep it in house as much as possible. So once a project comes in the door, once they've got a WME writer on it, they want to get a WME director. They want to get a WME star, WME producer. That's what packaging is. It's about putting together the talent that's going to top line this project and is going to get it sold and made and trying to keep it in house as much as possible. Now, for this service, agents take a 10% cut of whatever you make, and you normally sign a written contract with them to arrange for that. The second type of rep is a manager. And this is a little foggier and maybe you might be a little less familiar with it. Managers are a lot like agents in many ways, but they have a more personal relationship with you and they're focused less on getting you work in the short term and more in guiding your career long term. So an agent might take a finished script that you have if you're a writer and try to get some people packaged on it, get some people attached to it. A manager is going to be reading the drafts and giving feedback and notes and saying, "I think you should move it more in this direction." They're more personally connected to you. They can also negotiate contracts. That's something that, depending on their expertise, they might do. There are large management firms, but this it matters a lot less whether a manager is part of a large firm. Of course, if they're with a large firm and they have connections to people in the industry, that's great. But a lot of managers are small companies or even solo. They're by themselves, and it doesn't matter as much because they're not focused on packaging. They're more focused on using their connections, their Rolodex, to use the phrase, even though nobody literally has one anymore. But they're more interested in using all the people they know at the various places around the industry to try to help you move along in your career. Um, Managers, unlike agents, take a 15% cut. And believe it or not, this is often a handshake deal. I've never signed a contract with a manager ever. In fact, my first manager, when I asked him, why don't we have to sign a contract? What he told me is he said, managers get 15%. If you try to not pay me, I'll take you to court. And every judge in Los Angeles knows that managers get 15%. So contracts are unnecessary. So I can't speak for every manager. Maybe some managers do have, but I have never signed a contract with a manager ever. It's always been handshake. Um, this is okay. This is a little foggy because this is changing right now. But for a long time, there were union rules that basically said an agent or an agency cannot be a producer on a project that their client is involved in. Managers can. That's changing right now. Endeavor's starting to get into that pool quite a bit, and so things are changing with that. But for a long time, that was a rule that managers could produce with you, agents could not. Managers will often come first. You'll often sign with a manager before you sign with an agent, but they also tend to last a little longer. Agents can be kind of transactional and transient in nature. You might have a couple different agents throughout your career. People tend to have a smaller number of managers throughout their career. And then the last type is a lawyer. Everybody's, I presume, heard of a lawyer. These are entertainment lawyers. They focus on contracts. Typically, they focus on contracts and nothing else, and they are the contract masters. So they will negotiate. They won't find you more work usually, unless they're at a huge firm and they happen to know people. But what they will do is when you get an offer, they will look it over, and they are experts because they know what standard precedent. They know what this company paid another writer for a similar project, or what this company paid another director producer for another project. They know what the industry in general is paying for stuff like this, and they're masters on the small technical details where you can get tripped up very easily. And so they're your intermediary, sort of walk through the different stages of your contract negotiation. They won't really help you find work usually, again, unless you're with a very connected lawyer. But they will help you try to get the most money you can and the best deal you can from the project that you're on. It doesn't really matter. Some of them are with big firms, big famous firms. Some of them are solo. It doesn't really matter. The most important thing with a lawyer is that they're good, that they know the industry, and that they are devoted enough to you that they answer your phone calls. If they're with a great big firm, awesome, but it's useless to have a giant lawyer that never answers your phone call. Um, and the standard rate you pay lawyers is what I've always paid them. I don't know if this is universal, but I have always paid lawyers 5% on top of, but they're a little more one project at a time. An agent or a manager takes a 10 or 15 from everything you do in the space that they represent you for. Lawyers, they take 5 if they worked on that contract, but they don't if they don't. And then you might be kind of thinking like, okay, if you're tallying it up in your head, you're going 10% to an agent, 15% to a manager, 5% to a lawyer. That's 30% of whatever you're making flying out the door. So you might be asking yourself, do I really need all of these people? And the answer is no, you don't need all three, but you definitely need at least one. And the question of which one do you need is kind of elusive. It's a little hard to pin down because the industry is changing all the time. Agents and managers used to be incredibly different animals. Now they're very, very similar to the point that a lot of times they're almost negligible. And even lawyers are kind of getting more involved in helping clients set up other projects. So this stuff is very amorphous and it changes a lot. You really just kind of have to find the path that is right for you. Um, in my opinion, I would suggest, and they're famously, they're Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence. They don't have agents; they only have managers and lawyers. Um, Other people will have all three. Other people will only have an agent, not have a manager. It just depends on what opportunities present themselves to you. It's less about there's one right way and more about, well, what opportunity shows up. If you have an opportunity to sign with an agent, great. And that if that agent turns out to be really helpful, great. Build your system around that agent. Maybe now you don't need a manager. Maybe you just need to worry about finding a lawyer. If you find a manager first and that manager seems to do everything you would want an agent to do, then maybe don't worry about that 10% cut. Maybe keep an agent out of it. Just stick with your manager. It's really about finding the path that's right for you. But of course, the question now becomes, how am I supposed to get one of these people to pay attention to me? The hard truth of that is, if there was a simple answer to that, everybody would do it, right? I know it feels so far away at times. Like, how am I'm going to have this person that represent? How is that ever going to happen? Well, the good news is, if you followed our first couple steps, if you've got something you're really proud of that's passionate and personal to you, that really shows your voice, you have something that proves what your talent is, and they are looking for that. So if you can get it in front of them and get them interested in it, that's probably how you're going to do it. But the question is, how do you get it in front of them? So there's a couple different options you could look at here. Option one is you could win a screenwriting contest or you could win a film festival. Now, film festivals, I think, generally are pretty great. They're great networking opportunities. Wi-Fi is obviously fantastic. You meet other creative people. It's a really fun atmosphere. There's a lot to be gained. Screenwriting competitions, I'm a little wary about these. I know a lot of people that really believe, they write a script until they think it's just perfect, and then they submit it to every screenwriting competition they can think of, and they think if I win one of these or if I'm a finalist in one of these, I'm going to get reps, and then my career is going to take off. I'm a little wary about screenwriting competitions, to be honest with you, because most of them you have to pay to enter them. And once they have your money, they can reject your script or do whatever they want. And they never really have to explain themselves to you that much. A lot of them are, in my opinion, kind of thinly veiled scams. And so I would just say be very wary. The other thing is, there are agents and managers, mainly managers, that will peruse the finalists or the semi-finalists or the winner of screenwriting competitions and offer them representation contracts. That does happen. But generally speaking, the people I know that have done that, the managers and the production companies that find their way to them, are very transactional, and they'll sign you to a deal, but in 6 months, if nothing happens, you're gone, you're out, and they'll drop you just as fast. They're looking for the quick turnaround. And look, maybe that's a stepping stone, maybe that's a first step for you, but for me, I think it's more useful to try to put the time in to try to find someone that's more invested in you long term, because getting dropped sucks and you don't want to go through it if you can help it. Now, option two is you can put something on the internet that gets noticed. And you all know more about this than I do. You all are internet masters, and you know very well how the internet economy and ecology works, and how you can put things into that space and get people to pay attention to you. So I'm not going to lecture you about all the different ways that needs to go about, but I will give you an inspiring example, which is Fede Alvarez, who is a Uruguayan filmmaker who years ago, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, he made a little science fiction short about an alien invasion. Visual effects were really crappy. It was nothing that looked even remotely quote unquote professional. But as we've talked about before, it was really cool. It had an amazing sense of humor, and it was really personal and passionate to him. And Sam Raimi, the guy who directed some of the original Spider-Man movies, the Evil Dead franchise, he has a big production company called Ghost House Pictures. Sam Raimi saw this thing on YouTube and called this guy up, and within a couple months, he was negotiating a deal to direct a $30 million Evil Dead remake. Since then, he has directed Don't Breathe. He's launched a bunch of horror franchises. He's producing a ton of stuff. He's had an incredibly successful career. He's blown me out of the water. And he did all of that because he put one really cool piece of content on the internet that really was his voice and separated him. So that just goes to show you that really can work. Now, I don't know any more than anybody else what's gonna hit and what's not going to online. That's like trying to predict the stock market. But I will tell you that when people succeed, common theme seems to be that they're doing something different and unique that expresses who they are as a person. That seems to be what works. Now, option three is you get an entry level job at an agency or a production company. Now, agency and production company are two very different things, right? An agency is like CAA, what we were talking about earlier. And if you are a type A person, if you're good at organizing things, if you're good at managing phones, calendars, if you can keep people on track, on schedule, this is a great potential option for you. I couldn't do it. I'm horrible with that stuff. I'd have washed out. But if you have those skills, this is an incredible rocket ship start for you, because if you were, especially in an agency, you are going to get connected to the entire industry. You're going to be on the phone with every production company, every studio, every network executive in the world, just doing the basics. Now, it's hard work. You're going to meet a lot of jerks. A lot of agents are extremely high strung people, and you are going to get screamed at, and you're going to do people's dry cleaning, and it's going to be ugly. But if you've got the skill set to persevere through that, the people who come out the other side often do incredible things. So it can be a really amazing opportunity. Production companies, a little more chilled out, the probably not quite as unpleasant, and can be really cool opportunities as well. As I mentioned earlier, Imagine Entertainment, where I interned, that was one of my kind of starting points. That's how I made some connections. That's how I met people. The things that make this really useful, I think, is that you're going to meet people that are working in the industry, and you're going to be given an opportunity to work hard and put your foot in the door. And when the time is right, when you've earned some respect and when you've built a relationship, you're going to get maybe a chance to ask for them to help you. But in order to do that, you are going to have to learn how to ask for a favor. And this is one of the most important things that I think is not talked about enough, is the art of successfully asking for a favor. Because I'm not kidding when I tell you that my entire career effectively boils down to two favors that were done for me at the right moment that changed my life. Asking for favors is the difference between a career and not a career. And yet I feel that people so often don't understand when is the right time to do it, what to ask for, and how to do it. So I want to spend a quick second talking to you about how to ask for a favor, because this is so, so, so important. If you can do this right, this can be the difference between a career and not a career. I'm not kidding when I say I got a whole new career in game development with one favor. Following these rules really did change my life. So, what are the golden rules of asking for a favor? I tried to boil it down to three, even though you could argue there's more, but I think there's three really, really important things to always be mindful of when you're asking someone for a favor. Number one, be specific. The thing that will never help you is meeting someone who's powerful, who's in a position to maybe throw you some patronage, throw you some opportunities. You never want to lob your career ambitions at them. Never be like, "Hi, my name's Andrew. I want to be a writer. Help me!" Like that. That is going to get you nowhere. Okay. When you're asking for a favor, you want to ask for something specific. I've got a script. Would you mind reading it? I have a script and a director and a producer attached. We're looking for money. Do you know of any financiers that might be taking pitch meetings you could set me up for? The way that Hello Puppets, the video game franchise I helped make, the way that that came about is that I partnered with a experienced game development company. We put together a pitch, we put together budgets, we put together everything we needed, and then we asked a friend of mine to set up some pitching opportunities for us. And because we were specific, I didn't come to him and say, "I want a career in game development, make me a game developer." I went to him and said, "I have a specific ask I'm going to ask you for." The way that I would think of it is this: you want to imagine that the career you want to have or the project you want to bring to life is a chain with a bunch of links on it. When you're The time to ask for a favor is when you have the chain, but you're missing one link. The wrong time to ask for a favor is when you have one link and you're trying to make a chain. That is not the right time. You want to be very specific and very focused. And this sort of leads into the second thing: be prepared. The thing about people in this industry is they're actually amazingly generous, and they do really want to help you, but they want to help people that have earned it. And they want to help people that have worked hard and have tried to put themselves in a position of success. So, as I mentioned earlier, when I went and asked, I had a friend through a family connection, back to our earlier point. I happen to have my sister went to school with someone who happens to be in high level video game finance. And I went to him and said, "I want to make a video game. Can you help me find money?" And he looked at me and said, "Andrew, there's so many other steps involved in that. I can't just, well, what do you expect me to do?" And I said, "Oh, no, let me be very clear. I have partnered with a game developer that has released several games in this space that have been very successful. Here's our budget. Here's our timeline. Here's our game development. Here's our game design document. We had broken down the entire game. We had budgets, schedules, everything that he needed." And when he saw all that preparation, his tone completely changed. And he went, "Okay, wait a minute. Now I'm very interested in helping you." I asked him to set us up on one call. I think he set us up on like eight or nine. He overwhelmed me with support. once he saw that I had put thought and effort into the favor I was asking for. So please, please, please be prepared. Favors are powerful, but nobody wants you to dump your problems in their lap. They want you to bring them something that is almost ready but is missing a key piece. That's when favors are the most helpful. And by the way, if you're just starting out, a little pro tip for you, because I know that, like, look, it's going to be hard to assemble all the pieces a project needs except for one, right? I get that and it's hard for me to do. It's hard for anybody to do. So I do understand it's really difficult to get to that place. If you're meeting someone and you want to help, if you want their help building the chain with you, the pro tip that I have for you is don't ask for that. Ask for something small. An example is I sold a script last year, and I wanted to give it to a producer that I was hoping would help me sell it. But I felt that it was a bit too many steps to go to him and say, I have this script and I want you to take me around town and introduce me to people. And I want you to put the work into selling it and helping me develop it and all that stuff. And I knew that was going to be a bit much to ask for. So what I did instead was I said, I have a script. Would you read it and give me your thoughts? I'd really appreciate your feedback. And what I was hoping was that he would read the script and like it enough that he would go, you know what? I think I want to get involved in this. And so that was my way of sort of stealthily asking for more than one link in the chain, right? But still stuck with a very small ask. I then sort of roped him in to get him more involved in the project. So if you're feeling like you can't get all those pieces together, just start with something small. All people will always give you their opinion. And if someone loves something that you made, they might volunteer help that it would be weird to ask them for in the first place. So, third and final step, be grateful. You know, this is obvious, but it's really important. When you're asking for the favor, be overwhelming with your gratitude, even before they've done anything for you. Thank them just for even looking at you or thinking about you. Thank them for reading the email. Thank them for reading the text or even listening to you talk to them. Before they've even done anything, thank them for even trying. Whether it works out or not, thank them repeatedly. And if their favor actually bears fruit for you, drown them in gratitude. I think handwritten cards mailed to people are an awesome way to cut through the clutter and really say to someone that you care about their effort for you. After the first Hello Puppets game was made, I put the names of everyone who helped us get to the pitch process in the credits. And they were all really touched by that. They didn't expect it because it was almost 2 years later, but I wanted them to know I was still thinking about them and I still appreciated what they had done for me. So, gratitude is also so important because people like helping grateful people. Everyone loves to be thanked, everyone loves to be told, it means so much to me. Again, these are things people in this industry are actually amazingly generous. They do really want to help you, but they can't. You can't expect them to leverage excessively. You can't expect them to pay a really high price to help you, and you can't expect them to do your work for you. But if you put them in a position to be generous, I promise you, people will be amazingly generous with you because it feels good and they really do enjoy it. So be specific, be prepared, be grateful. Follow those steps. And when you're in the right position to ask for someone's help, I can't guarantee what anyone's going to do, but I will tell you that you'll probably have more success than you expected. So, my third and final mistake is red ocean. And I'm going to explain what this means. This takes a little bit of explaining. But in order to explain what this is, let me sort of take you back to where I was in my career. I just graduated from USC's grad film program. And I had asked a favor. I had asked a professor to read a script of mine. He had flipped out for it. He had ended up helping me get represented. He sent it to a bunch of his friends. One of those friends signed me. Suddenly I had reps. Suddenly I was off and running. And yet this was me for years, just all by myself, just nothing happening. Getting reps really did not change my life, at least not right away. As I mentioned earlier, good networking, substantive, meaningful networking, it doesn't pay off quickly. It really does take time to bear fruit. It takes years and years and years, and that's just the price of genuine connections. So I met a lot of people that ended up being really important down the road, but for years, nothing was happening, sold nothing. I was struggling to balance my day job with writing demands. And I do get people asking me sometimes, how do you be successful even though you have a day job? And I wish I had a better answer for you. It stinks. It's really unfair. The reality is, trying to start your career while you have a day job that isn't connected to that career is like running a marathon with weights around your ankles. It's totally unfair. You're drained of all your good energy. And then when you try to work at night or on the weekends, and you have barely anything left. Not to mention, I'm sure a lot of you will have spouses and kids and other obligations, and it's really, really hard. And I think it was the hardest part for me about the early years. It wasn't finding management, it wasn't finding making work that I was proud of. It was just having the space to give my good energy. And I strongly recommend, if you have any path where you could take time off from work, if you have a spouse that can support you or family that can support you, even for just a year, give yourself a year to make something or work on something where you can just give it your good energy every day. I strongly recommend it. I didn't really have that open to me, so I don't even really know how I got out of it. It was very hard. And then I also couldn't figure out my relationship with my reps. This was really confusing. It was just, technically I'm their boss, right? They work for me, but like they're a big deal and I'm nothing. And so it doesn't feel like that. I was so afraid of them that they would always ask me, "Do you have any questions?" And I would always just go, "No, no, I don't have any questions." And they would look at me like, "You don't want to ask anything?" And I would go, "No." Because I was so scared. I would ask one question, they would go, "Get this kid out of here. We're not going to represent him." So I couldn't figure out how to lead these people. I gave scattershot, contradictory orders and aspirations, and I was really not helpful. And so I just stalled for years. And the reality is, I wasn't making progress. And not only was I not making progress, I knew if it kept on like this, nothing was going to happen and something needed to change. And what I eventually found, my inspiration for that change came from this guy, came from Mario. I'm a big gamer. I've always loved video games. Mario, if anybody here doesn't know, is made by a company called Nintendo, who also made Zelda and Kirby and lots of other beloved video game franchises. And Mario's parent company, Nintendo, they have a philosophy called Blue Ocean that I read about somewhere, and it completely changed my way of thinking about my career. And to explain what it is, uh, I want you to imagine that it's a hot summer day and you want to go swimming in a pool, and you have one of two options. You can swim in this pool, or you could swim in that pool. Which one of those looks better to you? Probably the second one, right? Well, that's what red ocean and blue ocean is all about. Red ocean is it's a metaphor for fish fighting and blood being in the water. Red ocean is basically highly contested market space. It's where red ocean is something lots of people are trying to do, and they're all competing with each other. Blue ocean is spaces that no one has thought of yet, no one values yet, or no one is really looking at. There's a really good graph here that explains it. It's a little kind of wonky terminology. It's a little on the economic side, but it's red ocean is competing in existing market space and trying to beat the competition. Blue ocean is going to uncontested market space and trying to find new opportunities. And to frame this in creative terms so you understand how it can be useful for you, I want you to stop trying to be your heroes, because the world that created them is gone. If you got into this industry, when I started out, Chris Nolan was one of my idols. He still is a filmmaker I love to death. And a lot of people I knew wanted to be the next Chris Nolan, but there isn't going to be a next Chris Nolan, because the world that created Chris Nolan was that world, and that world is gone. The industry's changed, audiences have changed, the marketplace has changed, it's all changed. So if you run after him trying to be another him, you are going to fail. You need to be a product of your world. Now, the good news is this is not actually settling nearly as much as you think it is. It's not to tell you not to dream big or not to have big ambitions, because the truth is, almost everyone you've heard of, whoever your idols are, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Netflix or Hulu, or in the movie theater, whoever you look up to, I guarantee you most of them, when they got into this business, did not think they were going to be the person that you've heard of. They thought they were going to be something else. When Steven Spielberg first got in directing, he thought he was going to make Westerns. That was what he idolized. But by the time he got into the industry, Westerns were out. They weren't making them anymore. So he had to adapt. Also, George Lucas thought he was going to make art house cinema. This is a picture from his first movie, THX 1138. This is the kind of stuff he thought he was going to be doing, but there was no market for it. THX didn't make any money. So eventually he thought, well, maybe I could make this thing called Star Wars that would be a little more family friendly. And that took off, and as I'm sure you've heard, has done kind of well. There's a lot of market spaces that didn't exist. Nobody had ever sold toys based on a movie before Star Wars. George Lucas was a product of his world, not the world that came before him. And I want to encourage you to do the same thing. Always, always, always look at the marketplace as it is, not as it was 10 or 15 years ago. Always ask yourself these questions. Where's everybody going? How can I go somewhere else? And what is everyone else missing? Because these are the things that are going to help you. Not because, look, if you want to try to direct Marvel movies, that's a great aspiration. Obviously, you can do very well and you can make really, really cool stuff. But guess what? A lot of people want to do that. Now, if you're comfortable just getting in that big, overcrowded pool I showed you earlier, more power to you. But a lot of us, especially when we're starting out, we're looking for opportunities to give ourselves a little edge, a little advantage. And I suggest look for market space that is uncontested. And to go back to Issa Rae, who I spoke about earlier, when she started her YouTube series and then eventually made her HBO show, she gave an interview to a local paper where she said, I've always had an issue with the assumption that people of color and Black people especially aren't relatable, and I know we are. This is prime blue ocean thinking, right? She looked at the marketplace and she felt a gap there. She saw something that was missing, that she had a unique passion to address and to rise up to. And that's why, other than being very talented, she has been so successful. She was thinking about blue ocean. She didn't get in the big overcrowded pool. She went over to the pool no one was looking at. And when people figured out that she was right, it led to a huge and incredibly successful career for her. So always think about blue ocean. Now, of course, just because you think of blue ocean doesn't mean it's going to automatically be easy. I figured this out and then I took 3 different cracks at it before I figured it out. My first idea for blue ocean was there's never been a great video game movie. I'm going to write the first great video game movie. And I actually got a chance. I got to write a movie based on Battlefield called Rush. But this was a bit of a disappointment. I was not in the kind of creative control I needed to be to make a product. I mean, I'm very proud of Rush, but it was a IP that's owned by a massive corporation. The moment they greenlit us to make the movie, everybody at the company was fired. A bunch of new people were put in who didn't want us to make the movie at all, and they sandbagged us and blocked us from getting the wide release we should have really gotten. And the movie ultimately really suffered as a result of that. So I realized, okay, that's not going to be my path because I am this little pipsqueak writer, director, producer that is trying to reckon with the will of these massive corporations that own these IPs. So that's not going to work. So I went on to a second attempt. I said, well, maybe I can make a series about people who play video games. Maybe I can fill the gap because I've never seen an accurate representation of gamers and gamer culture. And actually, Matt Nyquist, your estimable professor and the guy behind this whole thing, he was a producer with me on this project, and we had an incredibly fun time. We made some stuff I'm really, really proud of. It was really cool and really fun. The problem here, and this is something that I've touched on a little bit, but is also something there's also a unique point I want to make, is that it was way too demanding. And this is something that I see happen a lot. I didn't understand. I was trying too hard to make everything polished. I wanted a Hollywood quality lighting, sound, actors, everything. So it was incredibly expensive and unbelievably time consuming to make even one episode of these things. I had to push myself to my breaking point. I would go for days with almost no sleep. It took a huge toll on my mental health. And even though the work we were making was cool, it wasn't sustainable because it was so miserably exhausting to make it. So one, I was making the mistake of assuming that the technical stuff mattered way more than it did. You now see on YouTube, there's these great YouTube series like Mighty Keef and a bunch of others that do this kind of content, what it's really like to be a gamer. But the guy just plays all the roles himself. He just changes shirts because he understands no one cares. Everyone is willing to suspend their disbelief. They care about your writing and your personality and your passion. I didn't understand that. So I thought I needed to make this whole to do that ended up being way too economically and emotionally burdensome. And this gets to another point. Please don't ever kill yourself over one project. Okay, don't go into debt for anything. Don't exhaust your friends and family's financial resources. Always remember that your career is more important than any one project, and never let any project become a black hole that sucks you down into it. It's not worth it. Do a reasonable amount of work on each project and move on to the next one. Do not ever let these things take a significant drain out of you because it will weaken you for the next thing you need to make. So my third attempt at blue ocean was okay. Well, if neither of those work, could I write video games then? See, when I started out, I'm old enough. I remember literally the first person shooter. I played it, and when I started out, video games didn't have writers. So even though I love video games, I was like, well, no, you don't have writers on video games. That's not a thing. But the market changed and the world changed during my lifetime. And when I looked back at the industry, I realized narrative is something that they're really starting to take seriously. So maybe instead of adapting video game IP over into film and television, although I'm still doing a little of that, instead of that, what if I just go over here and write video games over here sometimes, and then I write movies and TV sometimes? Could I do that? And the answer to that was ding, ding, ding. That worked. That finally clicked. So don't be discouraged if your first or even your first couple attempts at finding some blue ocean don't land. Remember, if this was easy, everyone would do it. It's going to be hard. You're going to have to go through some iterations. But if you're thinking about blue ocean, and if you're being mindful of your time, if you're not overburdening yourself, and if you're focusing on personality and your passions over technical stuff, you're going to eventually land on the right thing. You're going to make the right impression. You're going to make something that's cool that people are going to want. So I have some final kind of, so those are my three mistakes. And I've got some final kind of wrap up advice that I'd love to give you before we move on to Q&A. And I'll try to burn through these reasonably quickly. First one is mental health. I can't stress this enough. This is a war of attrition. As I've tried to emphasize, most people, it takes a long time to get where they're going. It may happen faster for you. I'm not trying to limit anybody, but it tends to take time, and you can't have a career if you mentally implode first. And I hate to tell you, I've seen this happen. I've seen people put the work in and fight through the trenches, but by the time success comes, they've allowed their mental health to be so compromised they can't enjoy it. And there is nothing more tragic than that. So please, first and foremost, be kind and gentle to yourself. There is no benefit ever in beating yourself up or being hard on yourself. I know I'm listing my mistakes here, but I'm also trying to be very supportive of myself at the same time. And please, please, please be your own advocate, be your biggest fan. Don't be hard on yourself. There's no upside. And also, find a center for your life. Whether that's family, faith, friends. Faith and family are very important to me. Whatever it is for you, look for that thing. A lot of people get really big into meditation, they get big into travel, or they have a hobby that really helps them unstress. Whatever it is, find something unconnected to what you do for a living or what you're trying to do for a living, and find something that gives you a sense of your values and your self-worth, and really hold to that, because that center will keep you strong during the lean years. Another little piece of advice I just want to throw out there: never, ever, ever set out to make anything only because you think it'll sell. Obviously, compromise, there's nothing wrong with adjusting things to make them a little more attractive or moving in a certain direction, whatever. But if you really don't believe in something, but you're trying to make it because you think it'll be a paycheck, you're wasting your time. Because first, you're probably wrong. Nobody knows what's going to sell and what doesn't. That's like thinking you know what the stock market's going to do. So you're probably incorrect. Secondly, what you make is going to be terrible because you're not passionate about it. And passion is what makes things good. It's what makes people put extra work into it that elevates it from good to great. Passion is always at the center of great work. And the third thing is that nobody wants to fund or buy insincere art. And I know it might seem like big budget, big scale things, like they don't care about passion anymore and they're just putting work out. But I promise you, they still want to hire people that love what they're doing. Everybody loves passion, it's infectious. So, if you think, I know so many people that have tried to write their script that's going to sell, and that script never sells. The script that sells is the one they wrote just for themselves, where they didn't care about the marketplace. It was just what they wanted to do. And ironically, it always flips from what you think it's going to be. So don't worry too much about what you think the marketplace is going to do, because frankly, unless you spend all day thinking about it, you're probably incorrect anyway. So the next thing I want to hit on is I have a little challenge for you. I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd like everyone here, just to yourself in your own head, I'd like you to answer the question I'm going to ask you in under 10 seconds, if you can. And that question is, what's a story? So I'm guessing, if I may, I suspect that you might have had a little bit of trouble with that, and that you might have come up with something like a definition, but you're also, as soon as you did it, you're realizing you have 5 examples that contradict that, and it actually doesn't work. And the point I want to make to you here is that almost nobody can tell you what a story is. Everybody knows a story when they see it, but almost no one can define it. Well, you're trying to, whatever art form you're going to get into, games, movies, TV, whatever it is, I guarantee you, you want to be a storyteller. So you should probably know, you should probably have a really functional definition of what a story is. I think that's something that will be really helpful. And frankly, I'm not going to lie to you. There's a lot of people making a lot of money in this business who could not answer this question. I'm not claiming that everyone who works in the creative arts is a magical guru that has figured this out. But what I am saying is, if you understand this stuff, it could give you an edge over your competition. So if you want to know what a story is, please read a book called Poetics by Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, and nothing else. I cannot recommend. Don't read Save the Cat. Don't read Story. Don't read any of the other books that will try to tell you how to tell a good story, because they will infect your mind with formulas that they use, which are fine for them, but they will limit your creativity. They will reduce your ability to see new and innovative stories. Aristotle's Poetics breaks story down to the raw genetic components. He assumes nothing, he defines everything. It's a hard read. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a really difficult thing to understand. You might want to try to have like a study guide with you as you read it. But I'm just telling you that if you can read it and understand it, you will have the tools to tell a great story, and it'll put you so far ahead of your competition in so many ways. I keep a copy of Poetics in my bag everywhere I go. I read it before I start on any project. It is the foundational work on creativity and on storytelling. So read Poetics and read nothing else except Stephen King's On Writing, which is amazing, and Flannery O'Connor's The Nature and Aim of Fiction, which is also really good. But those are a little more about the process of writing. Poetics will teach you the raw components of writing, and it is incredibly and it's incredibly useful. Last little piece I'm going to give you. Please read Shakespeare, and please read Mary Shelley, who literally invented the horror genre with a single book, or Jane Austen, or Agatha Christie, who invented the modern mystery. Please watch the films of Alfred Hitchcock, Stanley Kubrick, Kurosawa. My general point here is, please care about what has come before you. This is something I see getting missed a lot, is that we are in such a media saturated generation that I feel that our content creators have a lack of engagement or interest in things that have come before. And I get that watching old movies or reading old books, it does require some extra work, because these things aren't as effective as they used to be. It's a portrait of a different culture. They speak kind of not the way they dress, in a way that doesn't make sense to you. They use words you don't understand. I know it is harder to get into it, but there is so much rich storytelling tradition that has come before you. And if you open yourself to it, it can give you incredible things that you can rip off and steal and put in your work, that it's going to make you look like a genius, and you're going to run laps around other people. And frankly, and I know this sounds like an overreaction, but when I read the work of someone who hasn't read Shakespeare, who hasn't watched Stanley Kubrick, or hasn't watched Akira Kurosawa, I feel like I can always tell. People whose work is only based in their influences of the things that have been made while they were alive, their lens is very myopic, and it's very obvious that there's a lack of richness to the work that they make. And I really want to encourage you to open yourself and put work and time. If you're really serious about being a storyteller on any level, whether you want to edit, whether you want to be a cinematographer, no matter what it is, please pay attention to what has come before you. It matters so much. It has so much to offer you. And I know it's hard work, but please don't be lazy about it, because it can enrich you on a personal level, and it can enrich your work in ways beyond whatever you can possibly imagine. So that's basically all I have for you. But I do want to leave you with one small thought that I call the journey. And that I've tried to be very nuts and bolts and very practical. I'm going to get a little emotional and weird with you here before I leave you. And I'm sorry in advance if what I say makes no sense. Feel free to ignore it. But it's just something that's on my heart, and I really want to convey to all of you, because it matters deeply to me. Um, Part of the reason I don't want you to ever go make something that just because you think it's going to sell is because I believe the creative process is so much more important than you can possibly imagine it to be. I want to tell you that storytelling, one of the things you're going to learn as you start creating your own stories, is that when you're really on it, when you're really telling a story that is working, it doesn't feel like creation at all. It feels more like archaeology. It feels like digging up something that has always been there, and you're just finding it. And as you run your hands along the dirt, you find its shape, and you thought it was going to go right, but instead it goes left, and you're in this incredible state of truly discovery. And I want to impress upon you that this is an odyssey into the depths of you. The Greek philosopher Plato actually felt that ideas, stories, and fiction existed in a dimension of reality that is higher and more real than physical reality. And his argument was a table, the idea of a table is always a table, but a table in the real world can be destroyed in 2 seconds, then it's not a table anymore. And what if, and I can't prove that that's true, but what if every time you're telling a story, you are taking a journey into your little corner of that higher dimension? What if endless worlds are waiting for you there that only you can access, that are incredibly real and are utterly sacred? And I want you to view your creative process with that level of reverence and awe. I want you to know that whatever stories you tell matter, they are real, they are sacred, they are powerful. And if you don't tell them, no one's ever going to. So please, I beg you, get out there, start exploring, and get going because the world needs those stories. And that's all I have. Thank you so much. And now, if there's any time left over, I'd love to answer questions or if anybody's got anything.
Andrew, that was absolutely fantastic. That was one of the best, if not the best, um, talks on this industry I've ever seen, heard, or whatever. So, thank you very much for providing that for us. So, I just want to. We got several questions that I've already got in, but please, the easiest way for you to send a question or comment in is if you're at the live, the live showing. Talk to Preston or Jess, and they have a direct line to me with those. Otherwise, if you're on Facebook, just comment below the video, like many of you have already done. But take advantage of this because this is a really, really great opportunity for you. So, I'm just gonna give you a round of applause. That's I'm sure being joined by lots of other people. So that was amazing. Okay, cool. So first person that wrote in was Nick Dernhofer. I knew you were gonna have that reaction. Um,
Oh gosh.
so he just says hello, Andrew.
Yeah. Hi,
So,
Nick.
so I promise that you have actual questions here
Yeah.
coming. So coming in from Leah Jameson. Earlier you talked about the social media engagement with getting on that path. What tips do you have for actually getting that social media engagement?
Yeah. So that is obvious. That's a really good question, and the answer is extremely elaborate and intense. And I'm probably only vaguely qualified to give it to you. But what I'll give you some sort of pointers and sort of thoughts about what I think is the difference between stuff that engages on social media and stuff that doesn't. I think the first thing you always want to remember is that every social media platform is its own beast with its own rules and its own upsides and its own downsides. I had a friend of mine who's a very successful streamer once explained to me that hashtags on one platform are really good and will help you get elevated. Hashtags on the other platform will bury you and make you never be chosen by the algorithm at all. And so it's really important to understand what platform are you targeting? Are you targeting Twitter? Are you targeting TikTok? Are you targeting Instagram? Are you targeting YouTube? And it might be a good idea to think about what platform you like, what platform you think is going to be successful, and mold your content based on that, and try to do some research and talk to really smart people. You can always find these tips online, and like what makes a successful YouTube video, what makes a successful TikTok video. Read about that stuff and ask yourself the thing you want to make. What does it feel like it's lining up with? Which platform do you feel like it's going to be successful on? So I would just be very, very specific about the platform that you want to engage with. I think if you're making, in my opinion, the other little, just handy rule to keep in mind, if you're making informational content where you're going to teach someone something, you can be as long as you want. But if you're going to make fictional content, if you're going to make a story someone's going to absorb, as short as you possibly can, because fiction takes a higher level of investment for people. And the longer you make them sit down and watch, the less likely it is they'll get to the end. So if you want to make fiction, be tight, get it as narrow as you possibly can. High concept stuff is really good. It's really good to have a unique hook or angle that you've never seen before. And then the last thing I would say is once you've made the content you like, start spamming, start looking up writers on websites you like, start trying to find their email addresses and start blasting them. Start saying, I got this thing. Would you consider putting it on your website? Start looking for people on Twitter or wherever, whoever seems to have a megaphone that might broadcast what you've made. Cold call them. Be very, always start with, hey, first off, I'm a huge fan. I love this thing you did here. Because once people know it's not an automated email, they'll actually read. So start off, say what a big fan you are, say you've made this thing, you're hoping that they might spread the word about it, and then show it to them. And that's normally, you'll, again, like, you'll have more success with that than you might think if you put the work in. We did that on Good Game, Matt and I did, and we got on almost everything that we sent an email to because we knew we had content they wanted. Um, so yeah, those are a couple thoughts, but there's so much out there, and there are people who know more than me. That's just the
I remember that, and that was really quick too when we did that. It
very
was a very quick turnaround.
very.
Great answer. All right, so Gloriana Norland asks, how do you handle comparing yourself to others as a creative, especially when you're just starting out?
Oh man, that's a great question. That was actually, I was going to do a slide on that, and I was worried I was running over, so I deleted it. Um, Comparing yourself to others is a really, really dangerous thing. Obviously, the stock advice you will get from people all the time is don't compare yourself to others. Never compare yourself to others. You're running your race. They're running their. That is very true. However, I also feel like that advice is a little unhelpful in the same way that it would be unhelpful to tell someone who is standing in freezing cold water, don't shiver. It's like, yeah, okay, but I'm gonna do it. So the question isn't so, I don't know how any human being can possibly prevent themselves from comparing themselves to others. So what I would offer you is a slightly tweaked approach to that, which is to say that I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to be a little jealous sometimes. I think that a little bit of jealousy is okay. I think it's good. I think it can be a useful motivator as long as you don't let it become toxic. Rather than, as long as you take it from a point of view of, wow, that person's really doing something incredible. What are they doing? What are the steps they're doing and how might I recreate them? Sometimes it's good to ask people. It can be good to just walk up to people and say, I really admire that you're X. Would you tell me what you're doing or what you think, how you getting there? uh, People will normally tell you, especially if they have an even remotely friendly relationship with you. People will tell you. And the other thing is that jealousy can be a really useful motivator. There have been times in my life when I've used jealousy to kind of pivot me. I'll tell you kind of a funny. When I was at the lowest point in my career, I was making a colossally small amount of money. None of my projects were getting sold. I couldn't make any progress on anything, and a friend of mine invited me to come over to his office because he'd just been greenlit to produce this huge movie. And I drove over to the Warner Brothers lot, and he had a parking space with his name. We were in the same class together. We were the same. He's 2 years younger than me, and I was making so little money that I was considering, driving for Uber. And this guy had his name on a parking spot on the Warner Brothers lot. And I remember he said, "Park in my spot. It'll be good. My car's not there." And I parked in that, and I felt pretty horrible at that moment. I felt pretty. We had started from the same place. We were in the same class. He was here. I was back here. Really, really crappy feeling. But the honest truth is, a little touch of that is not the worst thing, and it can be a strong motivator. It did make me. I did start talking to him about what he was doing and how I thought I could benefit from it. And then the last thing I'll tell you about just comparing yourself to others is the healthiest, most important thing you can do when you're feeling that emotion is admit you're doing it and admit that it's okay to do it. I think jealousy is an emotion that we are pathologically trained to deny even existing. People will admit to being angry, sad, depressed, all kinds of stuff, but almost no one will ever admit to you that they're jealous. That's a really hard thing for us to say out loud or to ourselves. What I would, and the sad thing that I see happen sometimes is I see jealousy ruin friendships because people are jealous of each other. They don't want to admit it. So that anger flows into they find other reasons to be angry at someone they're jealous of. They go, oh, he's changed. He's just different now. Or, yeah, he didn't like that thing he said to me and he's just being weird. And like, but it's really the jealousy. They're just refusing to say it. So what I would suggest is it's okay to be jealous. It can be useful. Just don't internalize it. Don't make it toxic. Know that this career in this life, what's up comes down and what's down goes up. And that someone's going to be on top of the world right now. In a couple of years, that's going to be different. You might be at the bottom, and then a year from now you might be up. So all things are always going in a circle. And my advice is, when you feel jealousy, say, hey, whoa, I'm feeling a little jealous here. And just tell yourself, it's okay that I feel that way. It's human, nothing wrong with it. And don't make it someone else's problem. Don't get angry at someone else because of how you feel. Don't push it into some other emotion. Just accept that it's there and let it pass. And I promise you it will pass. And I promise you things will change. And whoever you're looking up to or admiring or feeling like is doing so much better than you, don't wish for their downfall. That's a huge, huge mistake. But I promise you that things are not going to stay that way. Everything changes in this industry. So don't let it get into your heart.
A great answer. Holly Allen says hi, Andrew. you got your fans out there. Max Morrow writes, at what point do you think about what you will be able to do or not able to do when writing a script? I mean, having access to certain equipment, location, or how you're going to pitch it.
Oh yeah, good question. I would suggest think about it right at the very beginning, because you're going to do there's one of two types of writing scripts, and they're both valuable. You're either going to write something that is the greatest thing you can possibly make, budget be damned, practicality be damned, who cares? Or you're going to write something because of an opportunity that you see in your surroundings. You see that you have a location and you know you're going to be stuck in that location, whatever. I would suggest always starting with that, begin with that, and then move forward. Don't try to introduce it later, because in my experience, story is a really delicate gossamer web of 1,000 different decisions with 1,000 different ramifications. And one of the things people often don't understand is that a change that you can technically make over here that you think doesn't technically break the story sort of ruins the feel, and then this thing doesn't feel this way anymore. It has 1,000 knock-on effects. It's something that writers are always trying to convince directors in the editing room, don't rearrange my scenes. They go in this order for a certain reason, and then they rearrange the scenes, and the movie doesn't work anymore. And we're like, I told you it wouldn't work that way. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to try to introduce something later in the. I would suggest from the very beginning, be thinking, what could I do? My uncle has a storefront. I want to do a story that's set in that storefront. Launch from there. I wouldn't recommend trying to introduce it down the road. The other thing I'll say too is that if you're doing the second type, where you're like, budget be damned, they're just going to write what I think is cool. Which, by the way, I support that 100%, because the script that began my career was a $250 million R-rated horror movie that has no chance of being made by anyone ever. And that's okay, because it got my career started. But when you write something really, really good, whatever it is, it needs to have a clear origin point. But when you write something really good, I had a professor once tell me, if you write, he was like, 90% of scripts are crap. The 10% that are good, he said the 10%, and that's by professionals, by the way. So 90% of scripts are kind of crap. The 10% that are good, you could throw it out the window of your car on the 405 and it'll get you a meeting somewhere. And there's a lot of truth in that. But the number one way to miss that opportunity is to be foggy in what your goal is. So I recommend, sorry, long-winded answer, but from the very beginning, know, am I doing a practical constraint movie, or am I doing a shoot for the moon, we're just going to go for whatever we want movie? One or the other. That's my advice.
That's fabulous answer. This is really great. Quayshawn Akins just has a comment from when you were talking about Chris Nolan earlier. He says Chris Nolan is the GOAT.
Yeah.
Um, yep. Daria Dennison asks, what was the process you took when adapting a video game for the screen? And what advice would you give when approaching doing a video game adaptation?
Yeah. So we were doing Battlefield, which is obviously really hard, because Battlefield either has no story or the story changes with every game. And, they're doing a different setting and there's almost no carryover characters. And also, you got to be honest with yourself. Is anybody playing Battlefield for the story? It might have one. Sometimes I thought they did a really nice story work, but it ain't what's putting people, it ain't what's getting that $60 or $70 put down. So here was what our approach was. We looked at Battlefield and we said, okay, what we always started by asking, and I've done a couple. So I adapted Battlefield. I also developed an adaptation of Silent Hill, and we almost did an adaptation of a video game called DayZ. And In all three of those cases, our starting point was we threw away any assumptions about the story from the games from the jump, and we just tried to start with what makes this game successful. What is the player experience that is making this thing cool? And we tried to narrow that down to a couple of really key points. And in the case of Battlefield, we figured out that one of the things that separates it from Call of Duty is Call of Duty is like, it's deathmatch. You jump in with a team, you just shoot whoever you see that isn't your teammate or whatever. It's very chaotic. But Battlefield is always trying to get you to operate as a squad. It's always trying to get you to be like, I'm this role and this person's this role. And as long as one member of your squad is alive, all of the members of your squad can keep on spawning back into the level. So there's a lot of strength in those little units. And that's what sets Battlefield apart. So when we were trying to write Battlefield, we said, okay, so if being a squad is what matters in Battlefield, then our story needs to be about learning to be a squad, learning to be a unit. How do you go from, I don't mean to trash Call of Duty because I love Call of Duty, but how do you stop being a Call of Duty player and start being a Battlefield player? What if we have a character that begins this as a Call of Duty guy? He's like, I'm going to go in and do everything myself. And then he comes out the other side, more of a Battlefield player. I'm so sorry, Call of Duty. And so that was very much our approach, and so that's what I would strongly suggest is that it's normally not a good idea. Speaking as someone who's now written video game story, I've been on both sides of it. Video game stories are written under very different conditions than movie stories are written, and very often in video games the story's kind of secondary. A lot of times the writer is working on their cool idea, and then a level designer comes in and goes, by the way, there's a lava level now. And you go, what? Like, I'm not, this doesn't fit into my story. Like, no one cares if it fits into your story. There's a lava level now, so work it in. And so that's what the game, and actually that can be the fun of writing video games. So I would suggest when you're adapting, don't think so much about, I would toss out almost anything you can and start from what's the experience of this game. And also ask yourself, does this game need an adaptation? Because I'll be honest with you, there's some video game IPs that just don't need to be a movie or series. Always ask yourself, in my opinion, is there something new a movie or show could offer that the game couldn't? Because if you try to compete with the game, you're going to fail. The game is always going to be the game. Um, and so I suggest starting from what are the key player components that are fun, and then try to layer back in the story and characters that the game has wherever you can, but always be focused on what's the player experience. And then two, you should ask yourself, does this thing even have, does this thing want an adaptation? Because I think that's a fairly important question as well. Yeah.
Great, great answer. So Aiden Raplago writes in, I followed the production of Rush. Corridor Digital made it. I was making my first short at the time, and it was some inspiration. That short has won some awards now, so thank you.
Wow, holy, that's amazing. That's so cool.
And then he has a question. Beyond Save the Cat, are there any other books that you would recommend? Maybe the directing counterpart?
Um, for I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. No, I mean, again, I think what you want to read is poetics if you really want to understand story. Stephen King's On Writing and Flannery O'Connor's The Nature and Aim of Fiction. Those are all great for teaching you the fundamentals, one, of what a story is, what a story is not, what makes a good story, what makes a great story. And then Stephen King and Flannery O'Connor will teach you how to sit down and make yourself work and what that process really looks like. Books on directing, I hate to answer just no, but the sad truth is, and Matt can tell you this too, that directing is one of those things that can only be learned by doing it. It's challenges, and because the reality is you are so different. What's going to be challenging for you about directing is so different than what's going to be challenging for somebody else. You might be great at some of the things that most people find insufferable, and then you might be terrible at something that is easy for someone else. And once you start directing, there's kind of nothing that prepares you for it, and it feels, no matter, it feels like being dropped in the deep end of a really cold pool, and you're just sort of going like this and trying to get to the surface, and you're just sort of you're just figuring out as you go. So I'd love to tell you that there's something you can read that'll prep you for that, but the best thing you can do is just go out and do it. And because here's the reality, that's the bad news, is that no, I don't think there is a book. The good news is directing doesn't change as much as you think it does from no budget to big budget. You might think those things are totally different. They're not. They're way more similar than you might think. Yeah, there are differences. I'm not saying there's no difference, but if you go out and shoot something with your friends and they're all looking to you for what scene are we shooting next and how am I supposed to do and where's the camera supposed to be, you are learning what directing is like at any scale on any budget. And when you have a problem thrown your way, when it starts raining or someone's running late, somebody's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or the scene isn't working, man, you are fighting the same battles that people who shoot the Avengers are fighting. It's the same stuff. So nothing is stopping you from writing your own book right now. And that's what I would strongly recommend. The guys at Corridor actually have a saying that I always remembered, and they used to say it to me all the time, where they would say, we have never regretted shooting anything ever. So there's no reason not to shoot everything you possibly can. And I think that's good advice.
Awesome. Brady Allen writes in, another fan, I think. Compelling talk, Andrew. Even as a scientist, there is advice that is germane to success in any field. Loved it. He's there. Leah Jameson claps. So Dr. Maria Stover, who's the chair of our department, says that this was amazing. And she was giving you lots of props in our faculty chat as well. Holly Allen says, awesome talk, Andrew. And Leah also writes in, so I'm actually an advertising and PR major, but I really love this talk. Thank you. Got a lot of props here. I think it's good for you to hear it. Gloriana Noland, fantastic talk. Gary Allen, outstanding, profound, and useful. Max, thanks you. That's great. Max, thanks you for so much. Daria, also thank you so much for speaking with us. This was phenomenal. Andrew Cheney's giving you applause. Leah McCracken says, absolutely wonderful talk. So much passion, advice, and heart. Loved every second. Great work, my husband. Can't get any better than that. And Max says, thank you very much. Well, Andrew, I think that was absolutely phenomenal. I'll be, I think, sharing this with students, and this will be on Facebook for you to watch later. Also, probably put it up on our YouTube and all that kind of stuff. So, is there any closing comments you'd like to make before we sign off?
No, I would just say thanks again to Matt for Matt and Washburn for putting this on. I think this stuff is incredibly important, and there's nothing. When I look at what the Wi-Fi Film Festival is doing, how it's connecting with people that are in the industry, and a lot of way more impressive people than me who have been speaking and I'm sure giving unbelievably valuable advice. There's nothing more imperative than getting connected with industry professionals who can offer their insight. So, congrats and just props to Matt and Wi-Fi for being such a great experience. And I hope this gets a lot of people moving and going out and creating stuff, because we need you out there. I promise you, no matter how many people you think are doing this, you have stories we need to hear. So everybody who has a passion for it, we need you. Get going.
What a great note to end on. That's something I try to tell the students. So with that said, this is the end of the 2022 Wi-Fi Film Festival. I'm I'm executive director of the festival, Matthew Nyquist, as well as an assistant professor at Washburn University. If you'd like more information about Wi-Fi or our program, please just Google Wi-Fi Film Festival or Washburn Mass Media Department. We'd love to have you in some classes there or participate in the festival in any way. And keep on the lookout also for film submissions for next year. We had some really fabulous films, and I'm sure we will next year as well. So thanks again, Andrew, and I'll be talking to you later.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.